because it's more a discussion, I can just set up the topic and we can discuss on there whether it's convenient or not to separate the integration. And especially I want to know if we want to do this quickly, this release, because I think we have time for it. Like we are just starting the release now. I'm going to explain the reasons why I think splitting could be useful. I'm going to try to figure out if there is an issue. I don't think there is any major issue. It's just work. That if we want to split, we need to, see what are the impacts, which I think are very minor, but still there's some work to be done. Like we need to rewrite some templates for Jenkins Job Builder and do maybe some script might change, but it's not really a big deal. That's what I want to say. So it's more like what I would like to get from this discussion, the integration people that we gather all together, if it makes sense. To do this release. That's the only thing I want to know. And if we decide that that is the case, then yes, then I can probably send a mail to the TSC after this, today or tomorrow, say integration group has decide. Well, probably I do a mail first in the integration saying to really get a full agreement, because not everybody is here, although most of the committers are here. And then if that goes, maybe next week I send a note saying we decide that we're going to split. Committer vote, something like that we can do, yes, to see what is the... So, see, I don't know how to start this conversation, but yeah, instead, I'm not going to show anything actually. Well, if I'm going to show, if for example, for Jenkins, what will be a little bit let's talk first why we need this. Second, let's talk a little bit what could be the problems I can figure out now. And then let's finally, I don't know, if we can already pass the mic all the different committers that are here and other people that they think this makes sense, that we can do as well. So first of all, why we are looking for this is because so far we have identified at least a couple of situations which is kind of inconvenient to have two things that we have today in integration. One is the distribution code, and the distribution code is all the code that we have to exactly build the graph distribution for Open Daylight. The second thing we have in the same repository is all the system tests and system tests and tools for testing. All that is also hosted in the integration group. So from the beginning, when we create the integration group, there was another reason that was small in the beginning, so we didn't see the need to separate these two. So just say we do the integration, and then because the system test applies to a distribution, it doesn't apply to a specific component, it makes sense to have all together, right? But we are in a point now where the distribution has grown somehow. We have many projects, although the code is not that big, it's actually small. Test, on the other hand, has grown a lot from the beginning. So now we have a test folder there that is full of things. It's very clear that from the beginning, even if it makes sense to have all together, we have separate folders. So splitting these two today is not a big deal because everything is already separated in integration. We have a folder for testing, a folder for distribution, totally disconnected. Now, why I say it makes sense to really separate that? The first reason is because today, I think there are several reasons. The first reason is just create a project makes sense because the kind of people that you need from one another is totally different. So to build a distribution today, what you need to know is about Maven, about what are the Karaf. You need to know Karaf very much, or at least at some level. And these are the things that you need to know today to build your distribution. Probably Karaf and Maven, how to put these things together. The second thing is, what do you know for testing is basically robot framework. See, what we are doing robot framework, but it's not only that. We are creating Python tools. We are creating some other things that are not just robot framework, and that is totally separated from the distribution itself. So it's totally different scope. It's totally different topic. The people knowledge or competence is totally different. And what I see now is that because we have all together in the same repository, every time that there is a requirement, release requirement, and this is the most important thing, for freezing the versions, to create branches, every time that there is a requirement, all this applies fully to integration, because this is where the real, the distribution, because this is the place where applies like code freezing or branch now because all the project has branch. While the test doesn't really need to follow this because testing can be welcome anytime. So we don't need to do any freezing thing. And we don't need to also branch. I still think it makes sense to branch because we want to have, every release we have different features. So we want to have a different version of maybe the same feature has more functionality. So we want to have a different version of the same test. So it still makes sense to branch, but maybe at different time. We don't need to branch immediately when all the projects branch in the middle of the release. We could branch the test whenever we start to get the new features in the next release, for instance. It doesn't make sense to branch our test. Now, every time that we have a commit in the stable of master, we need to cherry pick. And that, if we haven't branched before, is only one commit. Now, there is a point in a release cycle where you start to see new feature and new system tests for these new features. That is the right point for me to branch the test code. So these are the reasons that I think start to make sense to operate this better now that we have more system tests to really separate these two things. Now, the consequence, what is the consequence to separate this? I mean, functionally, it's only to create a new Git. Now, operational, we will need to get committers. We need to get a new project lead if we went for this. So if we really decide this is the way forward, we need to run some election, and we need to designate some initial committers as well. Actually, this order. First, designate the initial committers, and then they will vote for a new project technical lead. Another thing I want to advance is that if we were to split this, I'm thinking that the best way to do is to keep the integration name, because integration means all together. Keep that name for the distribution code and the packaging and the thing that needs Maven and some kind of building. That's another reason. Forgot. The second reason I wanted to separate is about the test code today doesn't do any build. It's something that is used in Robot Framework in the test itself, in this context, but you don't use Maven there for anything. But still, you apply Maven in all the structure, but you don't need Maven for that. Anyway, so said that is what I was saying before. Like, sorry. So what we need to do is create a new group of committers, and then from there, and this project, the new project will be actually like we can decide, but something related to test, because that is the part that I think makes sense to create a new project and call it, I don't know, JMO and the other, you have some ideas, test, system test, or it's mostly system test what we do. But if we need to be more global, we can call it just test, or any other idea that the committers or the people that are contributing, we can call this thing. And technically, just to finish this before we start the discussion, technically I don't think there is any big deal. The only work we need to do, I can show you, and for that I brought my computer. So I can show you in real time what will be technically the impact in the existing jobs. So if we go today to the Releng, and this is where the things really impact. So this is the Releng today. If we go to a particular project, just pick one, controller project. So we are creating, today integration is creating templates for two kind of jobs. Most of you already know, but if you don't know, I can let you know. The first one is when you see project distribution, we are responsible to maintain this distribution. I mean, today the distribution is automatically created because I don't know if there is any, no, it's not here. I asked Linux Foundation to get this distribution job done automatically, the same as the verify and the merge job. So it's automatically created by them, by the Linux Foundation, but we maintain the template for this particular job. And this job is just doing very simple thing. It's just building the integration every time that there is a merge. And if you see the configuration of this job, it's just, it should be, yeah, okay. You don't see clearly here because this is a variable, but this variable, I know, is being made out of the parameter that is project. So here what we are saying is get this parameter that is integration, from there extract what is the Git URL, and this Git URL for integration is what we are actually downloading in Git. And then what we just do is we just produce a Maven build for that, which is I just pass it here, build after. So this is a Maven build. And that's it. Actually, yes. And this is, no, actually, this is the trigger, sorry. This is the build environment. And where is the build here? SHAGM pre-steps. Build, here it is, Maven. With these parameters, and then you just execute. So this is all to say this job is fine. We don't need to touch it. If we were to migrate, this job doesn't need to be touched. The second job that I want to focus, that maybe we need to do something if we separate, is the system test itself. So today, what we are doing in a system test, let's go one for example. System test for a feature. So system test for a feature, we have all these parameters that we need to enter for this to work. And then the test itself is actually, again, it's downloading some repository that contain the test. Now, if we were to change this in a new repository, that will be here. So instead of project integration, here we need to change the template for this particular job and say project system test or whatever. And then after that, it will download the repository for the test. And later on, what we do is basically we set up all the environment. You are not familiar, but you will be with some people at least in integration. You set up all your environment, dynamic environment for your system test. And finally, you run a script that will deploy the controller. And finally, you get the robot framework to run on that. Maybe there is a small thing. The easy migration will be just to maintain the test folder in the new Git, because all of our scripts are actually based on the test folder. But if we said no, because now we're going to create a new thing, we can remove the test folder because the test is already the repository, so we don't need the test folder anymore. Then we need to do some adjustment into the scripts and everything, so we are reading the right thing, right? The right path and everything. But I don't think it's much work. We just need to take a look and see the script that are, this is one of them. This script is going to read something. But now that I'm thinking, this is also reading the test plan that we have today. The test plan, when we identify a test plan, the test plan has the full path in integration, which is test, whatever. So all this probably needs to change. Yeah. So what will be the impact as well if we were to split? The other impact could be in the integration job. For a project, it's only these two things we have. We have the distribution job and we have the system test job. The other thing I was thinking is in integration itself, the kind of job we have today, I don't think there will be any impact, because if you see the Jenkins in general, it's either a CSIT job, which is doing something with the test, or it's either a distribution job that does something with the distribution. So we already in integration has really this separation between distribution and system test. So it will be a matter to reshuffle this, to redistribute, say, so the new repository will have all the test, all that is CSIT kind of Jenkins job. And then instead of integration, they will be called whatever, test, and then the same name or whatever name we want to do. So does it make sense? And I think this is where I'm probably going to stop talking now. And now, if you can pass the microphone, someone there. So I would really want to know if this makes sense to do the splitting. And if we decide that, I will now send a mail so we can get more agreement in the integration group.
Yeah, I definitely think it makes sense. I would vote to do it. As I brought up before, I think there's another question that we need to figure out where the packaging subdirectories and stuff would land. So like our Docker configuration, RPM building stuff, Packer configuration for building base boxes, any future stuff like around hopefully Debian packages and things like that.
My idea for that is at least the integration part, leave it as it is. So keep the integration folder, packaging, whatever is there, untouched. So there is zero impact for the integration part of it. And all the impact and all the thing we need to work out is the test part of it, because that's the part that's going to separate it.
So does it make sense to take the integration part of this and put it in the RHEL engine builder project? Instead of, so we won't end up with an extra project, we will combine, separate the concerns of building and distribution.
So what happens if we create a new project, we're going to get a new...
No, I'm saying not create a new project.
Oh, you need,
Take-
no, in Releng, keep it all together. In
Keep the-
Releng Builder.
Yeah, the distribution stuff and move that to Rel Engine Builder.
Yeah, that probably makes sense. That I'm thinking just now loud, but I think it probably makes. I mean, the repositories we said the Git
Yeah, we'll have
makes
to move
sense
the
to
files
separate.
over, right.
Different project, different Git, so we don't have the same requirements. But for Releng in particular, you know, in Releng today, what happens is that every project has a folder in Releng, and this is where you configure your templates for all your Jenkins jobs. I need to think about this, Jamo, because it could be. Today we have templates for system tests and templates that are the other kind. Maybe it makes sense to separate that as well. What would be the benefit to get that together still in the integration? All the templates in the same place. Or you see some kind of synergy there or something? Because the obvious thing is that if you're going to create a new project, you're going to get a new folder in the Releng. So unless we say no, we don't want that because we think that, so I cannot see an immediate answer for that, other than the only thing that I can see is easy to migrate, because already all the templates we have today are called integration. It's called integration, blah, blah, integration. And maybe if we're going to create a new project, it's going to be more test, or whatever. But other than the name itself, I don't see now like a problem there, or maybe, or you see something. Other people?
I think one of the advantages of doing this is to have separation of concerns among expertise, right? I think we might lose a little bit of that if we move just into RelEng instead of creating a separate project that's specialized in distribution, Maven stuff.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I probably prefer to separate because it's more clear when you look at the RelEng what is the job that connects to the distribution and which job are made for testing. So in that sense, it's more. I mean, unless, yeah, and I'm talking too much because I haven't really took a look deep detail. It could be, and now I'm thinking, because maybe you are mentioning that, there are some files, we have JMO file that we have with definitions today in integration, and this same file, actually, yeah, now I get your point. The same file, if you look inside, has different definition for distribution and also for tests. So you need to split these files if we were to create a new folder for all that is the test kind of Jenkins test. So let me look at that. I think we need to decide that now because I will need to look at the type. I don't see any problem in separating anyway.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that's right. I'm not totally sure that's what JMO is proposing, though.
It's not that?
It sounded like you were saying that we should do that extraction step of the distribution logic into RelEng instead of into a new project, right?
Sorry, what is that again?
So we would take all the distribution building logic and the distribution subdirectory and drop that into RelEng. I'm not.
What does the Builder project do? What's the idea of Andy and Todd's project?
So, yes, it's release engineering. Oh, you mean take that part into, oh my God, that I get it now. So you want the scope, well, this is the thing, I get you now. And maybe it makes sense. To be honest, maybe it makes sense. We need to think this. So what happened today is there are two release engineering today projects, related a little bit, but not so much in the scope. One is auto-release, and the other one is the builder. The builder today is responsible for automation, all that is Jenkins Job Builder, the dynamic system, dynamic VM system. I explained yesterday, whatever, if anyone was in my conference, the Releng Builder people, what they are doing actually is all this infrastructure for the rest of the people to do things. That's the goal of they don't have anything in the scope like building a distribution today. We have another called auto-release, which maybe be more connected to what we do in distribution. The auto-release is a project that its mission is to create releases. And the way we do create releases today is not the same as we are doing in integration. In integration, what we are doing is collecting all the different projects and then create a distribution out of it. And what auto-release does is actually get all the repositories as well, and it builds. It builds individual repositories. It change version, actually, that is also an important part. It downloads a repository. It change the version of the artifact to show some kind of release in the version. And then it builds. It builds one by one all the project. This creates new artifact with the version that you want. And then after that, you release that. And that includes integration. So auto-release happens always after integration. So that could be a possibility.
That would also logically group with the packaging and deployment stuff as well. This all seems to form a sort of logical unit around.
Daniel, you actually are also doing packaging. So how do you see this proposal?
I think a benefit packaging-wise, it would be nice to, sort of a direction that we're trying to move is get a little bit more coupling between the packaging and distribution tools like Ansible and Puppet and stuff, and the release pipeline, right? So we can, create RPMs as we do a release or as we do nightlies or weeklies. We could create vagrant base boxes and Docker images along with those steps. So there's definitely some logical connections between those. And that's a direction I've been, kind of hoping to move anyway. This would be a decent opportunity, it sounds like, to formalize that some.
Because how I see this now is that the idea, if we just want to split, easy is just to go and create a new project test, move whatever is under test folder, and then just do the work in Jenkins here and there to get the split. Now, if we are saying that the distribution part could be living in another project, then it's totally different story. We keep integration as it is, and then we move the distribution to the auto-release. But for that, the problem I see with that is that we haven't really talked to the auto-release people. I don't know what they think.
Yeah, they're not here.
They are not here, and I don't even know if they knew. I mean, if I knew about this proposal, I could have invited them or something. I still need to think myself if this makes sense, because the scope is very different, to be honest. So you see the scope, even if we see some synergies, the scope of building a distribution out of all the projects and then create a release, a full release with all the projects is different. Mechanically, it's very different. Technically, it's different. Actually, there is Andrew there. I don't know if he's...
Yes, we need you, Andrew. Come on in.
Part of auto-release is to build the distribution. Right?
Auto-release is not building distribution. Auto-release is to build a release. And release is much more than a distribution. It's much more than a distribution. That's the thing that is important to understand. So in distribution today, we are not building any code. We are just taking all the artifacts from all the different projects that have built before, and then we just create a distribution. It's part of the change. We are like the last in the change in a continuous integration process. So everybody is building his own project. It creates an artifacts that are consumed by the downstream, and we are really the downstream, the more downstream project that is taking all the artifacts from all the different projects and create a distribution out of it. But that is not the same as release. And release, what is doing today, auto-release in particular, is going one by one, every individual project. Changing version is very important for them. We don't have anything we don't need to change any version. Actually, distribution is whatever version is available. But for auto-release, very important to change the version to a release one, build the project to generate the right artifacts, and that includes the distribution. So the distribution is, for the auto-release, the distribution is one small piece, like the same as any other project in the chain. It's just the last project that they built to generate the distribution, but in the end, it's one small piece. They need to change the version, and they need to build it, and whatever they get from there is the official distribution for a release.
I want to add one more thing to that. The auto-release has one extra component that's happening because it builds completely separated from Nexus.
Yeah.
The only thing it accesses Nexus for is things that are not open daylight, which means when the auto-release builds, it bubbles up issues where somebody's relying on something that has disappeared out of the repository. Potentially, we've seen that actually.
Yeah.
Projects were relying on artifacts that no longer exist anywhere.
But all the concepts in auto-release are, all the concepts in auto-release are the concepts we want to get separated from system test. So that's why it seems like it might naturally fit.
Yeah, so Andrew, sorry. This conversation came because we wanted to separate integration from in two parts. One is the distribution code, and the other one is the test code, because they are very different, and we are growing now, and I think it makes sense. It's the right time to separate. My proposal, or what I was thinking all the time, is to keep the integration, the distribution, the name integration distribution, and then separate the tests with a new repo, which is the test or test system test or whatever. So what JMO is proposing is, instead of doing that, is there any chance that the distribution can go into the auto-release? And I think for that, I doubt, because I start to think, even if we have common goals, create something that the user can use, The process that is behind the way we are doing today, the dependency that you need and the other need is very different, no?
The auto-release project actually is one of the few projects where we don't use any of the standardized templates for jobs.
Okay.
Whereas the integration project actually still uses several of our standard templates for doing build jobs. That's one of the things we don't want to really kind of get away from. If you wanted to separate the projects, as you're continuing to say, I would not move it into auto-release, honestly. Auto-release is a manually triggered system. We do a weekly build with it. There is an automated weekly build. That's the only thing that's automated with it. Everything else is manually triggered. And so we would not want that actually to go to an automated triggering for everything. You also have to realize that auto-release takes 16 hours to build now.
So I think I'm not sure that wasn't maybe the view that we were considering in all of this. It's more like the concept more about like logically grouping things, right? So we're interested in separating test things and building distribution type things. You have a bunch of building distribution type things. We're also packaging some directory.
Okay.
That kind of logically groups as well as auto-release.
Auto-release would still do what auto-release does whenever auto-release wants to do it. And now we're adding more stuff to that project.
Okay. We should probably pull Ton in on this too.
Yeah.
I can go find him.
I have a feeling, and this is because I know a little bit the two projects, is that even if there are some synergies, what you say is right. The way you operate auto-release today is, so in OpenDelight today you have regular projects that they follow all that's the good point. I'm gonna get there. The simultaneous release. So you have projects that belong to the simultaneous release, and you have projects that they don't belong to the simultaneous release. And what is the difference there is because all that belongs to the simultaneous release, you have very precise time, you need to branch, you need to create your version, you need to do this, you need to do that, a lot of requirement that, and this is why or the reason that we are saying now we want to split. Because we think the distribution, yes, it needs to follow all the process because it's one more project that needs to build out of all the others. However, the test, we don't need to have all these kind of things. Tests could be out of the simultaneous release. We just do whatever we feel. And now, what we're going to come up with Tan when he comes is the same discussion. Auto-release today is very independent. It's not making branches, or maybe they do, but whenever they feel. And they don't want to lose this kind of flexibility as well. And this is what we're going to get in the end to say, OK, distribution has to have its own folder because it has to be part of the simultaneous release. And we don't want all these policies for simultaneous release to apply to either test or either auto-release. So that could be the done. Yeah.
Ton, did Andy tell you what we're talking about?
So Daniel can summarize for you.
I get to summarize this time. So in general, we're talking about splitting the integration project because there's very distinct logical chunks around doing system testing and building the distribution. Jama brought up the idea or pointed out that there's some logical connections between building the distribution and auto-release. There's also connections between building like RPMs, vagrant base boxes, and Docker images, and releasing, cutting artifacts and stuff. And so we're just kind of exploring that space, looking for issues to the effect of like branch cutting isn't as flexible and stuff. So thoughts about potentially not drastically changing what auto-release is doing, but adding two other things to it. The distribution folder in integration, as well as, I guess, the packaging folder that contains RPM.
Actually, the
vagrant,
packaging, Daniel, I think maybe could fit better in the auto-release. I'm thinking now. The packaging part, maybe.
Yeah.
But you can answer both for distribution and packaging. Okay.
That was, just to repeat, I do think auto-release is the right place for distribution and
Okay.
because that's essentially what auto-release is doing, creating.
So this is my question as well to you. The reason we are splitting this, and I was explaining that before, is that distribution have a lot of requirements. Like you need to freeze your thing, you need to untouch your, you need to follow the simultaneous release as any other project, right? So one of the reasons we are splitting this is because we didn't want the test to really follow all this structure that you have for simultaneous release and all the policies. Now, my question to you is, if we put the distribution code, and I think I have no problem, actually that would be a good idea, would you agree to follow the simultaneous release there somehow, or you will create we can create a sub-project in Relem for that if we wanted to have all the policies all in that particular repository? So what do you think?
For testing and stuff? Oh,
No, for distribution.
it's,
So you know what distribution code, I mean, you know already, having enough here. Distribution code is just getting all the artifacts for the different projects and put the distribution together in Karaf. This is what we are doing. But because we are part of the change of the continuous integration, we are one more project. It's not like documentation, it doesn't care. But we need to build at the same time all the projects are building. Whenever anyone change version or something, we need to change accordingly. We are like a one more project in the simultaneous release. So that kind of thing is something that can be moved to auto-release as well.
yeah, I think so.
Okay,
And if it doesn't make sense, we could easily make a submodule of auto-release.
okay. So, yeah, but then it's something that we can explore. And I think, yeah, I don't know, we need to know. Yes, instead of creating a new project, we could move the distribution code to somewhere else and then start from there. Okay, I think that that could make sense to me as well. The only thing I need to, well, because we are not all the integration people here, we need to discuss probably more in mail. But this opens a new set of possibilities that I was not even considering. And I think impact-wise is the same thing. I mean, the impact is, no matter what, if we split, we need to reduce some of the jobs. But other than that, it's not really a big deal. Well,
The other thing that I wanted to highlight to both of you and anyone else who stepped in is that a goal of this packaging and deployment stuff that we've been doing is to get tighter integration with the release process. And so I think that would be another win maybe, is to have those in the same logical repo.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think it makes sense. And from my perspective, auto-releases actually is the simultaneous release, because we only build projects that are in the simultaneous release. We don't build projects that are not part of it.
Okay. I was thinking now today, the way this is that every project had its own distribution job to create distribution. This is what I reviewed before. And the only thing we need to host there is whenever there is a change in the distribution code, we need to have a verify and merge job for that. Every time that someone changes something in the distribution. But other than that, I mean, I can't pull it out, but I think distribution job today is simple, and they follow very much the same as any other project. And the only thing I want you to think done after this today is whether the auto-release could follow a simultaneous release, because that is the only condition today for the distribution code. You need to follow exactly whatever is in the simultaneous release, timelines, and all, especially, you don't need to do testing or anything like that, but it's mostly all the timeline for branching and for versioning and all this kind of thing. But if we could do, so I can look in here, all that the distribution is merge job, which is everybody has this job in its repository already. These are the kind of job that we will move to auto-release if we were to do that. Is merge for the branch. This one, I think, this one we can think about it. So this test, what it's doing is just to start a distribution offline and see if we have any internet dependency or not. So this we could, I don't know, we could keep it there or maybe move it to test because it's a test, but it's not a big deal. And the rest is, what is this one? Oh no, this one is nothing to do. This is to test a full distribution. This one, maybe it makes sense to move also to the distribution. Well, we can think about it. But this is a very simple job that it takes one artifact. You tell me an artifact. You know about this job. You take a URL, and then you're going to download that and pass all the system tests that you have. We can have it in distribution, or we can have it in the test repository. It doesn't really change much.
Something to keep in mind is auto-release clones every project.
Or what?
Auto-release will clone every single project in...
That I know, but distribution works totally different. That's what I say. Distribution doesn't really do that. Distribution is, distribution, you just take the artifact from Nexus and then you build the Karaf container. That's it.
Right. So in cases where you don't want every single project cloned, I think it would make sense to be like a sub-project.
Okay. Because this is only, just to be clear here, we're going to maintain the distribution code in this new place, but then the distribution jobs, all these tests, they could live separately in a different place. Doesn't really, like, if it is something that we are doing a test, we move to test. If it is some kind of other thing, we can do it anywhere else. So probably the only thing we need to do is some verify merge job, just to make sure that the thing can build. And that's probably pretty much what we need to do there. I don't think there is, I'm just thinking now loudly, but I don't think it's much. And the only thing we need to make sure is whenever we need to branch or just follow all the instructions that we are giving, and that's it. And because the life cycle of this code, or the way we use this code, is very different from the auto-release code, maybe it makes sense to create a sub-project. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. But
Yeah, I think the key is if it doesn't affect every, like if you don't want to clone every single project, then it should be a sub-project. Because auto-release is an aggregator repo, really.
yeah.
So like you clone auto-release, and then it clones every other repo underneath it. So if there's operations you need to do that's not against every single repo, then you probably don't want to put it in auto-release directly, and it'd be better as like.
Yeah.
Like
So
even
auto-release is something that goes after, like I said before. I mean, it's not doing the same as distribution. Distribution is like any other project, but auto-release, take individual project, they build, they change version, build, and then that's it. And for auto-release point of view, integration is one more project. That's it. It doesn't do anything special. It's just one more. So that's why, I mean, the scope is different. Mechanically is different, and the only reason is because we don't want to now create maybe more repositories in OpenDaylight, but maybe just to include the code itself in the auto-release or you know, or a repository that is under auto-release. But you also tell me this is something that makes sense to you, or yeah.
So when you say sub-project, would the name be something like Relinge auto-release distribution, Relinge auto-release packaging, or would it be like Relinge distribution, Relinge like?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, yeah. Okay. And then Relinge distribution would be cloned by auto-release as part of this normal instead of cloning integration, we'd have still the system test and integration.
How do we manage today if you have sub-projects or sub in auto? This is the only example we had today of sub-project, no? Project and sub-projects. So I want to know, Andy, what are the things when you run a sub-project, you share really the main repo, or you still need to you had your own repo? Do you have your own?
The sub-projects are really just a namespace issue. So essentially it's just a folder structure. So Relinge itself is technically a folder, or another project in Garrett, but it's configured in such a way that it's not allowed to have code in it. It's just set in Garrett for ACL creation. And the sub-projects underneath that are actually, that's what they are. They're actually a full repository. So that's really all it's doing. We do have one more project that was just, it was a TSC meeting last week, was greenlighted, was a new sub-project, but not Relinge. It was OF extensions / circuit switch or circuit SW. So we now have a new, another namespace as well that's doing sub-projecting in.
So let me see if I understand correctly. So in the end, is creating a sub-project is the same as creating a project? It's only the name?
It's just a namespace thing. It really is just a namespace.
It's only a namespace, because then it's probably the same question here. Like, do we want to?
It would be possible for you to take the integration namespace and create two sub-projects, one of testing and one of distribution. You could do that. We could take the current repository and essentially create new projects underneath.
Okay. So I think the question that we want to split is clear. What is not clear yet is how we're going to do the split. And apparently I see now a third possibility. No, we were two, and now another one.
You're welcome.
Yes. Yes.
You really are wanting to split the committers is what you're trying to do.
Yes. No, that is clear as well. Split the project, split the committers, split all that. And then it's only the namespace that I don't know yet how we're going to do this, because our thinking was easier just to separate you had integration, that means something like, distribution or something, but then separating tests. But now we can do also
The other thing that you want to consider is, do you want to change the namespace of our current distributions? Because they are in Nexus as org, open daylight, integration, distribution.
No, that you made a point now. That is going to be a big change maybe. So that's why I think so this is my opinion. Today, the project, we have two parts, distribution and test. The one that has more dependencies and we need to look how we do very carefully is the distribution. Because there is a lot of dependencies there and people that, the test is something that is running a little bit apart. And that's why I think it was more easy if we were to separate something, separate the test as well. But
that point that Andy just brought up is pretty serious. That would be a very non-backwards compatible change to change that URL and how we're pulling artifacts and stuff, I think, right?
What, sorry?
The point that Andy just brought up, org, open daylight, integration, if we were to change all of this and move the distribution logic out of the integration repo, then that would change, and that's a pretty serious non-backwards compatible change.
It's changed in the Nexus, exactly. When you publish things in Nexus, instead of being integration, then it's going to change completely, and then it's going to pop up in another place.
To me, that's a pretty strong argument for leaving the distribution folder in the current integration repo, pulling out system tests into a new repo. That'd be a really serious non-backwards compatible change, I think. Yeah,
it makes sense. What would make more sense to you, Andy and Tan? Which approach, namespace, you would like more to see?
We could follow what I was suggesting with you splitting the namespace you currently have, because that doesn't affect the pathing at that point.
So which one you said?
If we were to take the distribution and essentially create a sub-project of distribution underneath the integration namespace and take the tests that you currently have at the top level of integration and move them into a sub-project. Those aren't going to, the tests themselves are not tied to the namespace. It's just our artifacts that we have to worry about. So if you were to take the current integration project and essentially split it into two inside the integration namespace, that A, gets you the separation of the committers and who cares about what, and B, it keeps the namespace in the same location.
So you are saying that you prefer probably to get the system integration and then create two subgroups there, and then because we already separated in folders, we could operate that way. Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah, I actually like that approach because it keeps it clear that these are integration.
More than moving to auto-release or anything like that we said in the beginning.
Yeah, branching will still be the same. It's just you now have more repos to branch.
So you get your own repo. So that's the thing that I understand here. The idea is we get different committers, different repositories, different policies, but namespace, we are both resulting projects are in the same integration route. Is that what makes sense for most of the people? And we could create a project for packaging. If we're going to do that, I will create already something for packaging like its own, because in the end, it's the same problem happened with who knows about packaging. It's Daniel and maybe So in the end, we need. So I will create from the beginning 3 sub-repositories there, and then we could start with that. Now, do we need to create committers? Yes, probably yes. We need committers and project technical leads and everything like that.
Well, we would also have to go through the TSC for this, just like any time any project is split out.
Yes.
The one other thing I want to point out with doing this is because of the way we're essentially saying we want to dispose of the current repository that we have, though we'd want to keep all the history, obviously. To do this properly, we would have to make sure that all current submissions are either closed or abandoned, and then we would have to essentially throw away the current repo. I would keep all the history, and then we would take the code and we'd split it between all of the various repositories and move the history essentially with them. So there's some technicalities around it, but it's just work.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me, and actually thinking more thoroughly, I think it's, these 3 areas that I'm just in mind now, the distribution, the test, and the packaging, they should have their own committers. And packaging is something that we haven't looked much in the past, but I think it's going to be more looking in the future, like more ways to distribute. So I believe it's going to be not only you, Daniel, but hopefully more people contributing there. And
Hope so.
So that's why I think it makes sense to do it sometime. Obviously, you are everything there, committed, for a technical lead, whatever, everything. But it would be nice to start something like that, because in the end, it's a different competence, different kind of thing, and it makes sense to separate.
Sounds really reasonable to me.
Okay. Any other thing or thought?
So with any of these three scenarios, they would all preserve. With any of these three scenarios, they would all preserve the Git history of the files, right?
Yeah, this is what.
There's no chance to lose them, right? Okay,
Yes.
that was my concern.
Association inside Garrett on history.
To some extent.
Yeah.
But the repositories themselves as at merge point, so the official code, what's actually merged into the branches, we would not lose any of that history. Yeah, we would not lose any of that. We have spun out projects a couple times already, so we have done this where the history essentially moved with the project. This is the only time we allow a project essentially to keep history when they create a new project.
So very good. So, yeah, I think it's probably the best we can do. Your idea, Andrew.
I like it. I'd vote for it.
Yeah. Anyone? Anything? Okay, so then this topic is closed, and I will send a mail after this to the integration group to see what we agree here. It's something that everybody don't want to see. Hopefully not. And then after that, I will plan to probably say something the next TSC call, next Thursday. I probably, when there is a time for integration always, but I will advance that we would like to talk about this. And then we just get the TSC blessing or whatever we need to start doing this. Actually, before M1, we should get all the PTLs. So when is M1? Sorry, for phase 2, if someone remember. I hope we have still time. I don't think it's a problem. So we can still go to the TSC, get the blessing, and after that, run for PTLs.
I'm fairly certain that even if you were to miss the milestone in this case, because we are working very hard at not changing the namespace,
Okay.
we're not going to run into the problem.
Okay, cool.
It's more a matter of we have to clearly communicate when these changes are going to happen, because people, the clones of the repository you currently have will become irrelevant.
Okay.
You'll have to essentially reclone.
Okay.
Exactly, which is why I'm saying that when we decide to make the cutoff, provided the TSC says yes, that we have to make sure that everything that's currently in Garrett is closed out or abandoned.
Okay, cool.
Because we can't move that information.
Perfect.
And just to make it,
Yeah, but that's fine, Jemo. I think in the end it makes sense, because I see growing in the packaging distribution, because this distribution needs to have its own competence, its own people, even if there are two. And the same with packaging. I will expect like this. I don't know how we're going to do this. Probably we just poll the people, whatever you want. The system committer, which one you want to be committer. So we do some polling if we were to do this, that I think we're going to do this. And then after that is, it makes sense. What other thing we can...
The one other thing I want to mention with the namespacing, the way we're currently doing Garrett, because of the way we do ACLs in Garrett, it is possible to have a committer that is part of multiple projects in a namespace, be essentially a meta committer.
Okay.
So we can do that. So if there is somebody that needs to be basically a committer of all of those. The only authority it essentially gives them is essentially committer authority in all of the sub projects. Mm-hmm. So if for some reason you needed to have if more projects were created in integration, then anybody at the integration committer level would essentially be a meta committer to all committer.
I don't see a need for that, for the reason that we said before. It's totally different competence and scope.
I'm pretty sure the TSC would object to that too, because that's not the normal committer or PTL lifecycle. You can't just like a new project be created and you're magically a committer on it. I'm almost sure they would object to that.
I'm just saying it's possible. We're not doing it anywhere.
Yeah.
I would object to that on the TSC.
Yeah, and I think for this is like, I would like, it makes sense to me. Some people can say, why are you going to create a project just for the packaging that is a small thing? Well, we have created already projects for very small pieces of software, I can tell you now. So Nobody in TSC can now tell me that we are doing this with a small piece of code, because I tell you, I'm going to jump on that. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense because it's yeah. I don't know, Jamo, what was your concern, if something is small will not make it well or something, because but that, I think, for instance, the one that will follow all the simultaneous release and paperwork is going to be distribution. Test is going to be, you know, its own, whatever the test people want to do with that. And packaging, I believe, is going to be the same. Whatever there they decide to go, no go. But both these two, I don't think is going to be part of the simultaneous release. That's what I'm thinking. And with that, you are free to go. Right? Thank you. We are creating some other things that are not just robot framework, and that is totally separated from the distribution itself. So it's totally different scope, it's totally different topic. The people knowledge or competence is totally different. And what I see now is that because we have all together in the same repository, every time that there is a requirement, release requirement, and this is the most important thing, for freezing the versions, to create branches. Every time that there is a requirement, all this applies fully to integration, because this is where the real, the distribution, because this is the place where applies like code freezing or branch now, because all the project has branch, while the test doesn't really need to follow this, because testing can be welcome anytime. So we don't need to do any freezing thing. And we don't need to also branch. I still think it makes sense to branch, because we want to have, every release we have different features, so we want to have a different version of maybe the same feature has more functionality. So we want to have a different version of the same test. So it still makes sense to branch, but maybe at different time. We don't need to branch immediately when all the projects branch in the middle of the release. We could branch the test whenever we start to get the new features in the next release, for instance. It doesn't make sense, so we didn't see the need to separate these two. So just say we do the integration, and then because the system test applies to a distribution, it doesn't apply to a specific component, it makes sense to have all together, right? But we are in a point now where the distribution has grown somehow. We have many projects, although the code is not that big, it's actually small. Test, on the other hand, has grown a lot from the beginning. So now we have a test folder there that is full of things. It's very clear that from the beginning, even if it makes sense to have all together, we have separate folders. So splitting these two today is not a big deal, because everything is already separated in integration. We have a folder for testing, a folder for distribution, totally disconnected. Now, why I say it makes sense to really separate that? The first reason is because today, I think there are several reasons. The first reason is just create a project makes sense because the kind of people that you need from one another is totally different. So to build a distribution today, what you need to know is about Maven, about what are the Karaf. You need to know Karaf very much, or at least at some level. And these are the things that you need to know today to build your distribution. Probably Karaf and Maven, how to put these things together. The second thing is, what do you know for testing is basically robot framework. See, what we are doing robot framework, but it's not only that. We are creating Python tools. Just send a note saying we decide that we're going to split. Committer vote, something like that we can do, yes, to see what is the... So, see, I don't know how to start this conversation, but yeah, instead, I'm not going to show anything, actually. Well, no, if I'm going to show, if for instance, for Jenkins, what will be a little bit the, let's talk first why we need this. Second, let's talk a little bit what could be the problems I can figure out now. And then let's finally, I don't know, if we can already pass the mic, all the different committers that are here and other people that they think this makes sense, that we can do as well. So first of all, why we are looking for this is because so far we have identified at least a couple of situations which is kind of inconvenient to have two things that we have today in integration. One is the distribution code, and the distribution code is all the code that we have to exactly build the Karaf distribution for Open Daylight. The second thing we have in the same repository is all the system tests and system tests and tools for testing. All that is also hosted in in the integration group. So from the beginning, when we created the integration group, there was another reason that was small in the beginning. Because it's more a discussion. I can just set up the topic and we can discuss on there whether it's convenient or not to separate the integration. And especially I want to know if we want to do this quickly, this release, because I think we have time for it. Like we are just starting the release now. I'm going to explain the reasons why I think an splitting could be useful. I'm going to try to figure out if there is an issue. I don't think there is any major issue. It's just work. That if we want to split, we need to, see what are the impacts, which I think are very minor, but still there's some work to be done. Like we need to rewrite some templates for Jenkins Job Builder and do maybe some script might change, but it's not really a big deal. That's what I want to say. So it's more like what I would like to get from this discussion, the integration people that we gather all together, if it makes sense. To do this release. That's the only thing I want to know. And if we decide that that is the case, then yes, I can probably send a mail to the TSC after this, today or tomorrow, say integration group has the size. Well, probably I do a mail first in the integration saying to really get a full agreement, because not everybody is here, although most of the committers are here. And then if that goes, maybe next week, it makes sense to branch our test. Now, every time that we have a commit in the stable of master, we need to cherry pick. And that, if we haven't branched before, is only one commit. Now, there is a point in a release cycle where you start to see new feature and new system tests for these new features. That is the right point for me to branch the test code. So these are the reasons that I think start to make sense to operate this better now that we have more system tests to really separate these two things. Now, the consequence, what is the consequence to separate this? Functionally it's only to create a new Git. Now, operational, we will need to get committers. We need to get a new project lead if we went for this. So if we really decide this is the going forward, we need to run some election and we need to designate some initial committers as well. Actually, this order. First designate the initial committers and then they will vote for a new project technical lead. Another thing I want to advance is that if we were to split this, I'm thinking that the best way to do is to keep the integration name, because integration means all together. Keep that name for the distribution code and the packaging and the thing that needs Maven and some kind of building. That's another reason. Forgot. The second reason I wanted to